Welcome. Thank you for joining us. We're excited to be talking with Melissa De Genova, a housing expert, BC Conservative candidate for Vancouver-Yaletown. As a real estate community, housing is at the forefront of our decision-making process, and we've been impressed with some of the conservative housing policies, including allowing for 3-month building permits, prezoning land, eliminating delays for individual projects, the presumption of compliance for architects and engineers, repealing or potentially delaying some of the energy code that's adding to the cost of housing, potential for allowing gas in new developments, establishing a BC development tribunal to appeal city decisions, a $1 billion per year civic infrastructure renewal fund, and some of the other questions which we've seen through the Slido about Bill 44 and what a BC Conservative government would mean for family-oriented housing on formerly single-family and duplex owned properties. The structure of today's webinar is going to be some opening remarks from Mark Steinkamp, the Executive Director of Odd Squad. Odd Squad is a preferred charity within the Laidler organization, and we ask you to look into the work that Odd Squad does in our community and see about supporting them either financially or volunteering through many of their community efforts. My brother, Tim Laidler, is going to say some opening remarks for Melissa De Genova. We'll have an opportunity to hear from Melissa, including a few questions from some of our development partners. Then we'll move into the Slido Q&A. With that, we welcome Mark Steinkamp to say a few words about Odd Squad Production Society. And in the meantime, please go to the Slido link to ask your questions. Mark, welcome.
Thanks very much, Bill. Appreciate everything that you've done for Odd Squad and giving me the opportunity to talk about what we do. Hello, Melissa. I know you can't hear me right now, but it's nice to hear you as well. So I've only got a couple minutes, so I'm going to be quick with what we do at Odd Squad. So almost 30 years ago, a group of Vancouver beat cops down at Main and Hastings saw young people coming down and experimenting, which they thought was a nothing drug. At the time, it was heroin and crack cocaine, smoking those drugs, and they wouldn't draw a link between where those drugs would lead them. And so we would tell our story to them and where their lives were going to go. Some believed us, some left. Some told us that, oh, you're the police, you're supposed to tell us drugs are bad. So we would collaborate with drug addicts, and the drug addicts would tell them their story and how they got there and how they used to be teenagers. And a lot of those kids would leave. And some didn't believe anybody, and they were already going down and entering that cycle of addiction. We took pictures. We went out to schools to show the end of the road of the very vulgar and tough existence that people who live on the street exist in. We got very popular, and so 7 of us, we bought a broadcast quality camera, and we went out and we filmed with the cooperation of the addicts, because none of the addicts wanted to see anybody else end up where they end up. Almost 30 years later, I sit in our studio and our facility in Burnaby, British Columbia. So we've got 2 pillars. One is physical literacy. Our thing is judo, but it's also hiking through the Duke of Edinburgh program. It's woodworking, it's volunteering in the community, and it's film work. So you may recognize us from a documentary where we started out called Through a Blue Lens. Well, through that registered charity that we've become, we've continued on making different documentaries. You can see Tears for April, which is the follow-up, the 10-year follow-up. And we've made documentaries on methamphetamine, stolen vehicles. I just finished an update for a 3-part series on fentanyl, which if you're interested, is available for free on our website, oddsquad.com. And we've got documentaries on gang issues, Indigenous community, and our social media footprint is quite large as well. So in the short time that I have to explain, Bill and his crew are going to send you out a little brochure about what we're doing. We continue on with focusing on youth. A bunch of us have retired. A bunch of us are still working in the police departments, and we mentor youth. We've got about 100 kids who practice judo and volunteer and do the Duke of Edinburgh program with us. And we need funding and we need support. So in that document that you're going to get, there's an opportunity. It is an opportunity now to, if you're looking for a tax benefit for the year, to donate to us. We've also got a Christmas party coming up on November 21st in a facility just across the street from us at the Portuguese Cultural Center. And it's going to be an awesome event on November 21st. There's an invitation in that document. There's also a sponsorship request for some different levels. If you're interested, you can reach out to me directly, marketinfo@dodscott.com. It's all about mentoring youth. I talked about the downtown east side. Well, actually, most people who are in that cycle of addiction aren't in the downtown east side. They're in our communities. They're our neighbors. They're our friends. They're our family members. And our whole goal is to get kids, because most people end up going down that road as youth. We want to wrap them up in good peer influences and good social activities like judo and the other things we do. And well, we need help to do that. So, and Bill's been a great help for us. So I think that that's about my time. So please take a look at that document. These are some of our sponsors. If you're interested, open up that document, have a look, or get a hold of me directly. I'll give you a tour. If you want me to come out and talk to your group or talk to your school about substance use or gang issues, give me a call as well. I think Tim Laidler is going to introduce Melissa De Genova.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks.
We appreciate all the work that you do at Odd Squad, and I encourage everyone here to look into donating and supporting the work that they do in our communities. Tim, welcome.
Thanks. Thank you, Mark. The fantastic work you do. My name's Tim Laidler. I'm here to introduce our keynote speaker, Melissa De Genova. From a little bit of my background and how Melissa and I crossed paths is I served in the Canadian Forces in Afghanistan. Coming home, I ended up doing a master's in counseling psychology at UBC and helping roll out a national veterans mental health program. And what I learned is we can have some of the best mental health programs for veterans out of the top universities. It's fantastic work. It can help reduce the symptoms of PTSD, depression, and other things. However, if veterans don't make a transition back to a community, back to a place where they can lay down their roots, start to have families, they really struggle, and they often, unfortunately, regress back into those issues. That's where I met Melissa with her work, not only in City Council and other places, but also her work for Honor House, Veterans and First Responders charity that makes sure the families of those people have a place to stay if a veteran is needing to get medical services. And it ties it all back to this important housing issue. Again, we can have all these fantastic services and supports, but if we don't have enough housing, the right type of housing, people who are vulnerable continue to struggle. So it's my honor to introduce Melissa. She's a lifelong Vancouverite, passion for community. She served 3 terms on City Council in Vancouver and with the Parks Board. She had leadership roles there, including the Finance Committee Chair, Metro Vancouver Director, and a member of the Mayor's Council for TransLink. She brings over a decade of private and nonprofit residential development experience. Her professional expertise is widely recognized, with Business in Vancouver naming her top 40 under 40 for leadership in creating affordable homes in BC. Melissa graduated from SFU with a Bachelor in Arts and Political Science. She has a ton of volunteer experience that I've touched on, but she really is committed to restoring a family-friendly neighborhood by eliminating the chaos and disorder. She is married to a Vancouver police officer. She's a devoted mother of her 6-year-old daughter. And I know Melissa is fighting every day for safety, public safety, especially in Yaletown. So with that, I welcome Melissa De Genova.
Welcome, Melissa.
Thanks very much, Tim. And thanks to Bill also for having me. An honor to be here with you all today. I just wanted to start by thanking you for the opportunity as the candidate for Vancouver-Yaletown representing the Conservative Party of BC. We've seen how the affordability crisis in BC has significantly impacted, especially in my community here in Vancouver-Yaletown, where people are living in smaller and smaller spaces every day, and they're relying on their public spaces, such as their parks and community centers, to be their backyards and their living rooms. But it's thanks to each and every one of you who's here with us participating in the webinar today that you're really the unsung heroes of the housing crisis that we're trying to fight. Working together with the home builders is the only way that we're going to be able to achieve better supply. And that's a commitment that John Rustad and myself have made, along with our entire team, as we move forward into the election on October the 19th.
Great. Well, thank you for being here. It really means a lot to the real estate community that we have, that you're engaging with us, you're sharing your positions and taking our feedback. So thank you very much for doing that. For the rest of the webinar, we have guest speakers who would like to ask you a live question, and then we're going to move into the Slidos. For anyone who's attending on the webinar, if you go into the Slido, please upvote the questions that are most important to you. That'll give them the highest likelihood of being asked. But to start, we'd like to invite Dan. Dan is an executive of Small Housing. Small Housing is a not-for-profit and has been working on bringing more family-oriented and smaller living spaces into our community. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you for having me, Bill. Thanks for having me on. Melissa, thank you for taking the time to take my question. Melissa, your party has promised to repeal Bill 44, which allows for fourplexes as of right in most single-family lots in BC in communities of over 5,000 residents, drastically providing the possibility of adding more housing supply across our province. As the party of fiscal responsibility, and given the significant municipal and provincial taxpayer investment already made to implement this bill, how does your party plan to address the financial cost of undoing this progress? And what measures would you put in place to ensure fiscal responsibility?
Thanks so much for that question, Dan. It's a really important one. It's one that I've been asked since we've made some of our announcements on our housing rollout policy and plans. And instead of looking at, as you had mentioned, how are we going to this? You had mentioned that this is progress. We see it as we need to make progress quicker. We need to be more agile. And we're just not seeing municipalities currently coming along with the BC NDP government and the heavy-handed approach that they've had. We would rather use a carrot instead of a stick. And, John Rustad and our party have committed to transit-oriented developments, have committed to building more homes, have committed to different types of housing throughout different communities. But really, it's important that we do this in collaboration with the home builders, as well as the municipalities. We've seen some municipalities, for example, Burquitlam, not coming forward as quickly as we'd like to see. And this is about getting homes built, more homes built for more people. So we actually see it as we do have a strategy, we do have plans, and we were very happy to be endorsed recently by ICBA for the plans that we have rolled out. So what you're going to see, I want to be really clear, this does not mean that there is going to be a right-out ban on removing duplexes or fourplexes or sixplexes in some municipalities and communities. That's definitely what we want to see moving forward, is more homes for more people. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we're doing this in a way that we're aligning the permitting, we're aligning the municipalities, and we also have to look at each of our charters, right? We have the community charter with most of our municipalities. We have Surrey now asking for a brand new charter, and we have the city of Vancouver that has their own separate charter, which I'm sure many of you have dealt with as well. So I think that it's important to let you know that we still have a commitment to transit-oriented development, and we still have a commitment to making sure that, home builders who have invested, and we see that, we understand. And I've heard from home builders who have said to me, I invested in, I purchased this lot with plans that I'm moving forward with. What happens now when the Conservatives take government? That was something that was just literally mentioned to me this morning by a home builder. But at the same time, I want you to see what we can do moving forward and how slow the process has been. And also under BC Builds, right? We have $2 billion that hasn't been deployed currently. And I think it's really important to consider that as well. At first, that was announced by Lisa Helps, senior advisor to the Premier, as a fund that was going to fund more homes for seniors and low-income families. Now we've seen that move to fund more homes for middle-income families. I'm not seeing the money actually deployed in the projects, and we haven't seen the results. We need to be more agile. We need to build more homes for more people faster, and we've committed to doing that through, a 6-month permitting process, working with municipalities. And as I said, just to finish answering your question, it's about using a carrot, not a stick, not having a naughty and a nice list for municipalities, and instead working with municipalities to say, if you're going to work with us and we can work together on a better permitting process, and we'll let you still have your autonomy, you'll receive more funding from us at the province.
Thank you, Melissa, and thank you, Dan, for the question. Appreciate it, and I'm sure it's going to be coming up more in the Q&A. So thank you for that. Avera Construction, Gavin McLeod. Gavin was one of the leaders in Multiplex. They've been building net zero homes in Vancouver for a significant period of time. Gavin has a question regarding incentives for building with net zero. Hi, Gavin, welcome.
Hi, Bill. Thank you. Hi, Melissa. Yeah, I think it's sort of, you could probably build on your last answer once I give you a bit of insight into where we're at and our question. We've been building in Vancouver for 17 years now, so we've seen the evolution from single family to the duplexes on the residential zones and now multiplex. We also began starting building net zero homes in 2020 when the city of Vancouver amended its single family bylaw to provide an incentive for extra floor space for building net zero. Another driver for that was the introduction of the BC step code, which I believe is a mandated step code. And I think by 2032, the province is currently expecting homes to be built to a net zero ready standard. So we decided to take that step as early as possible, but obviously benefiting from the incentives is good. One thing good for us and for our clients. One thing we noticed, of course, with building net zero is that it's a full electrification process where we're also not putting natural gas into homes, and the homes are entirely electric, which does provide some challenges with BC Hydro. I guess I'll get to my question, which is, does the BC Conservative Party have an idea, speaking more to the carrot approach, of the types of benefits or incentives that might be possible to encourage the continuation of green building and net zero, as well as through the multiplex or building more dense homes in a sustainable way, more specifically, I guess, net zero or step code 5 equivalent?
You've touched on a number of different issues there, Gavin, and thanks so much for that. What we've said is really we need to make sure that there is alignment. It's absolutely ridiculous right now, the levels of bureaucracy that small home builders such as yourself have to go to achieve, especially when you're building the greenest and cleanest type of homes. So it's important that not only do we realize that and incentivize that, and that'll be through funding to municipalities who are willing to come along with us, but it's also not only just making sure that we pull everyone together in alignment with the same code. But a good example to share with you is I recently have spoken with development professionals and industry professionals about the changes that come forward after they already have a project in the application process. And the anxiety that they feel if that doesn't come through in a timely manner, and then we see policy or codes change. So that's a concern that we've heard, and we think that it needs to be streamlined. And that's really where it comes down to trying to work with municipalities to kind of come together. And what John Rustad has announced, and I think it's across the board, and I want to touch on your hydro question too, is we need to move forward and streamline with municipalities to more of a single permit process instead of having multiple permits. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous that you would, for one project, have multiple permits. And let's say you tick the boxes on most of those. Are you going to hold up a development or a home from being built because you're waiting on this last permit? So we need to take a more holistic approach to that. And that includes also the step code as well, and bringing all municipalities in line with us on that. But there certainly will be incentives, as you mentioned, for greener and cleaner buildings. That being said, we also need to balance that with affordability. So municipalities who are willing to move forward faster with us will receive more incentives than those who decide to drag their feet. And I think that it's more of, if they'd like to come along, they're welcome. They're welcome. We're offering them a seat at the table, but it's about how do we do this together? And at the same time, allow municipalities to have their own autonomy. We're not here to use a stick and tell them what they need to do. To another point there, I see funds being available, possibly through other programs where perhaps they have untapped potential right now, especially on the affordable and the nonprofit side, to make sure that we're also encouraging greener and cleaner building in that sector as well. And that's the industry that I come from, is non-market housing. And we don't often see that being the route that is preferred, because it's all about affordability. But when we're looking at affordability, I think that it's important to balance that definitely with greener and cleaner standards. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Gavin. Thank you for the question. So before we move into the Slido questions, I'd like to highlight one of the announcements the BC Conservatives made, which is the $1 billion per year Civic Infrastructure Renewal Fund. And want to get your thoughts on what it would look like as a developer. Some of our concerns are when the funding is delivered to the city, whether it will be used for the smaller development projects to help offset the costs that smaller home builders are taking on. For an example, in Burnaby last week, under the new townhouse one zoning, city engineering is going to be requiring separated sidewalks, curb and gutter, street lighting, and the cost and infrastructure upgrade is to be borne by the homeowner or the developer. Do you see a pathway forward that some of this funding could be directed directly to the developers to offset those costs, or will they continue to be flowing through the cities and be provided by the city at their discretion?
Thanks for that question. I think that there's a way forward, but again, in using that carrot approach and working with the municipalities, I also think that municipalities might feel relieved if the province is willing to take that on and make those grants available directly to small home builders. But again, that's a conversation that we need to have, again, with home builders as well as with the municipalities. What I'm hearing from and being that I'm a former city councillor, I can tell you that adding more bureaucracy at the civic government level adds more cost. So I would expect that my colleagues at the local government level would be relieved if the province would take some of that on. And I think that where there's a will, there's a way to do that. And some of the things that we're talking about is, sewer hookups, making sure that we're working with municipalities to make sure that if BC Hydro, which we all know is often one of the biggest holdups on moving forward with a development or a project or your applications and timelines, depending on which municipality that is, that we have other options. And that's something that we've said. And I just want to say that's across the board, no different than what we've said about ICBC. For example, if you can't be competitive, we will be looking for other providers. And the same will apply to BC Hydro. If you're not going to be able to hook up a project fast enough, we're going to have to look for other options to make sure that we support small home builders as well, understanding that the costs that you bear are passed on to the market. I mean, that's just a reality that you face, and you shouldn't be punished for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Melissa. We are going to move into the Slido Q&A section. So if you want to ask your question, use the QR code to the top left. There are a number of questions that have been asked from yesterday and today. Starting at the top, we have 20 participants are wanting to know, what do you think about the NDP spec tax and flipping tax? Are they actually needed, or do they hurt people's savings more than they help?
Well, first of all, I think, and I want to go back to talking about some of the other taxes that we've seen, the NDP implement and how they've been applied in a way that hurts people that they weren't meant for. And when it comes down to a flipping tax, I think we have to look at families who are struggling right now, and they may be able to just get their foot in the door of the market. And that's what the idea of BC Housing Affordable Home Ownership Program was all about. So why are we penalizing people who may be getting into the market, and then they're able to move up to possibly a townhouse, single family detached home? Maybe that's their dream. And if that's what they want to do, right now, this flipping tax, it not only doesn't encourage new development, it doesn't help home builders, it doesn't help those who want to move up in the market, but I believe that it actually, no different than the program that the BC NDP has just announced that would require home buyers to repay 40% of their mortgage back, and they wouldn't realize the benefits over the years of that. It's really going to cut homeowners off at the knees. And I think that we're actually going to see it push people outside of the province of BC. So I think that whenever a tax is implemented, like the empty homes tax, the speculation tax, we have to consider what are the benchmarks for that tax? What are we doing? Why are we doing this? Is it to encourage more long-term rentals? Because if that's the case, then I also, Bill, want to address the Airbnb ban as well, or the short-term rental ban, as it's called. and why some municipalities and not others, when we haven't seen a correlation to that putting long-term rental back on the market. My apologies, I know there's another question on short-term rentals down Slido, just a few questions down, but I think that we have to take a holistic look at what are we trying to achieve through these taxes. And if we're trying to achieve making sure that families who have affordability issues are living in their homes, then we have to look at the fact that right now, to receive subsidy from BC Housing, you can have a household income limit of $128,000. So I think sometimes these taxes aren't helping those that they're meant for. And in fact, they're hindering and pushing people out of our province. That's what I'm hearing.
Thank you. Melissa, based on what reasons have the BC Conservatives decided to scale back Bill 44? Developers want to build multiplex, owners want the land lift, and renters want more units.
Again, I want to make it really clear that we are committed to building more homes, and we need you as partners to do that. You are on the front lines, and this is a partnership together. But what we've seen through Bill 44 is that not all municipalities are coming along with that. And we need to make sure that all partners are at the table together. I realize how frustrating it is for each and every one of you when a municipality permitting times aren't in line with what we'd all hoped or what has been promised. And that's what we're seeing with the BC NDP. Their promises on Bill 44 were to build more transit-oriented development and to move faster. And in some municipalities, that's true. But province-wide, we're just not seeing that. It's not actually, the evidence isn't that we're seeing necessarily more projects coming online across the board. So it's really important instead that we take a different approach to this. So I want to share that we are committed to building transit-oriented development in partnership with you. We want to take the handcuffs off free enterprise and make sure that you as small home builders and as developers have the tools that you need to do that. But in doing so, if we see municipalities dig their heels in, as we have with some, that's not going to work for everyone. So what we need to do is look at incentives instead. And that's the approach that we're taking. So although Bill 44 will be changed under Conservative government, rest assured, there will be more opportunities. And in fact, we've committed to working with municipalities and home builders to ensure that we actually shorten permit process times for you. And if I had more time, I'd love to share some stories about that bill, but I don't know if we have that time. But I'd like to see, zoning aligned in many municipalities where, it should be a race to who can do it, who can move forward fastest, and they're going to be the ones who reap the rewards of those incentives and the funding that the provincial government has to share through programs such as BC Builds.
Yeah, this is worth spending some more time on because as a real estate community, we've purchased properties for the multiplex, and putting aside the TOAs and the condos, which will be more complicated approval timelines and different processes, but more specifically for the 4 to 6 unit townhomes on single family properties. We've had clients that have bought properties. We have clients who have started permits to start designing their own multiplexes. And the fear is that if we don't take such a strong approach with the cities, that we're going to get stuck in public hearing after public hearing, committee meeting after committee meeting. For the city councils, that there's no clear majority or no clear consensus on city councils, that they're going to have difficulty finding the pathway forward, and that this is going to turn into delays on the city level and create uncertainty for these projects that have already been started.
Well, I hear you, and I feel that anxiety, as I mentioned before, when I talk to small home builders or developers who have invested their money into properties, and this is how they've already moved forward. I happen to have just spoken to a small home builder who has plans before a municipality who reached out to me for a meeting because they're concerned about what will happen after the election. And I want each and every one of you and people in those in that position to rest assured that actually my hope and what we're committed to doing is making sure that you don't get stuck in red tape and bureaucracy, that we cut some of this red tape and bureaucracy that we're seeing and work with municipalities to ask them how we can streamline permitting. And that's why John Rustad and our party has committed to, and it's not going to be overnight. I'm not going to make promises I can't keep, but we've committed to, trying to get each municipality. Some will be faster than others, but especially in the bigger urban centers, to 6 months for rezoning and development. And I'll share a quick story with you. I was successful as a Vancouver City Councillor moving forward a number of motions that looked at the most affordable types of housing. And I know that that also includes duplexes, fourplexes, sixplexes, making sure that they go to the top of the pile. And it was through a program called the SHORT program, still there in the city of Vancouver. And that stands for social housing or rental tenure. But to give you an example, that there would be a program where if you're building in a certain level of affordability, that you would be able to get your permits faster. And we're committed to working with municipalities on that. I was going to say we are, but obviously I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm just too excited to get working on it. But rest assured that we will be there for you. We support that. And repealing Bill 44 does not mean a ban on duplexes, on fourplexes, or sixplexes. I've heard that from a number of people, and I just want to dispel that myth or that rumor. That does not mean that we are going to cut those from any plans, and we're going to work with you to make sure that you can move forward, because you're on the front lines of this housing crisis, as I've said.
Thank you. Appreciate it. The flipping ban appears to have had little effect, if anything, only a negative effect on the province. This seems like another follow-up on a similar question you just answered. Do you plan on reversing this policy? Anything to add on that topic?
Well, we have to look at this very carefully. And while we don't have anything specific in our platform, the commitment that you've seen from the BC Conservatives is a common sense-based approach. And if this is hurting small home builders, which we know it is, it's hurting families who can't move up in the market, then that's something we seriously will be looking at. Again, we need to uncuff, or we have to take the handcuffs off free enterprise, and we need to make sure that we're working together with you and not penalizing you. So when you buy a piece of land, if there's another opportunity for you that's going to allow you to build more affordable housing, or, to move, that you're able to be agile and do that, to assemble land, or if that's to build a duplex or a fourplex that you have and then move on, maybe renting some of those units, maybe selling some of them. I also think that we have to look at the fact that right now you can't stratify a laneway home as well. So there's a lot of different policies that we need to look at with municipalities and within the charter together. But again, it's not going to be a heavy-handed approach. At the provincial level, though, there are huge issues with the flipping tax, and the people that it's punishing are those who are trying to create the most affordability. So you have my commitment that will be something that I will be looking at if and when we do form government and I'm elected on October the 19th.
Thank you, Melissa. What are the Conservatives' views on tenancy rules, vacancy tax, Airbnb, considering their negative impacts on investment activities and rental supply?
Thanks so much. That's a big question. There's a lot there, so I'll try and unpack each and every one of those. So if we want to move forward with rent controls, we're hearing from landlords and homeowners that it's becoming increasingly hard for them with the current tenancy rules, that it's been more of a stick than a carrot, that we're not providing enough incentives to homeowners to want to rent their homes. In fact, I've heard from some homeowners that are 100% fed up, and they've had such a negative experience that they've taken their units off the market. I just recently heard from a gentleman who wanted to move back into his unit. So he sent through all of the proper channels notice to his tenant, and they went to the residential tenancy board and rejected his request to move back into his own home. So I'm hearing all of the stories from homeowners about reasons why they don't want to put their homes on the long-term rental market. And if what we're trying to do is increase rental housing in this province, we have to take a good hard look at that. So I think that's the first the first issue to address here, as well as consider the fact that homeowners have mortgages to pay. We understand that interest rates fluctuate, and when you handcuff homeowners with rent controls, it can be really difficult. So that's definitely something that we have committed to looking at. When it comes to looking at short-term rentals, and I think I already addressed part of this, so I'll be shorter on this bill, it's not working. The ban municipality by municipality, and I'll use the example of Parksville. I think that that's a really good one. We have not seen a correlation to the ban on short-term rental units and long-term rental units going back on the market. We're seeing people take their units off the market entirely and not want to rent. And we're also seeing difficulties in these municipalities that want to jumpstart their economy, especially after COVID. We're seeing how this is having an effect on them, and neighboring municipalities don't have these same bans and are reaping the benefits of it. So it's just not fair. It's not a good approach. And although we do support municipalities having regulatory authority on licensing, we're also going to try and work with them to bring that in line so that every municipality doesn't have a different licensing structure. Did I answer all of those, Bill?
You did, and the questions come up again, so we'll skip this one as it's a similar type question about the NDP housing rules affecting retirement plans, similar down the Airbnb and rent controls. Another question, do you believe rental restrictions have helped the issue of rising rents and lower rental supply in the city as the NDP has suggested?
Well, I think I kind of just answered that question, but to reiterate, if we're seeing less and less units on the rental market, then no, I don't think that it's doing what the NDP had promised that they would do, which is, and they were very clear about this, we're going to put more homes on the rental market, and we're not seeing that. This heavy-handed approach has in fact pushed homeowners to not want to rent their units. And we're seeing less and less developers wanting to invest in rental properties as well. I won't even get into the REITs right now, Bill, because I know our audience here is more small home builders, but I could do that as well. And we're seeing them pull out of some of the opportunities, especially in Metro Vancouver, that we've seen them usually in the past be very interested in on sort of larger scale rental projects as well.
Good. Thank you. Well, what would you do with rent cap, with the cap on rent increases? It's capped at inflation right now. Would you keep it, raise it, or get rid of it altogether?
Well, that's something that we're going to have some conversations about. Again, I don't want to make any promises I can't keep, but we are hearing loud and clear from homeowners that this isn't working for them as they have rising interest rates. And although we're seeing interest rates drop, overall, this hasn't worked. This hasn't, having these controls on these increases. That being said, we do have to balance the affordability. So that's something that we're committed to looking at when we come into office. But again, rent control isn't the way that we necessarily, that's not the path forward for the Conservative Party of BC. It's about making sure that we're doing whatever we can to incentivize and encourage homeowners to rent their homes. And right now, we're not seeing that necessarily with the rental cap and the small increases that aren't in line with the costs that we see homeowners having to bear annually.
Thank you. Will the BC Conservatives ensure that homeowners who support small-scale multi-unit housing for their property will not lose that opportunity? And let me add into that, because there was another question about what does the policy mean when it's referring to 2/3 of residential land will be available for small-scale multi-unit housing? What if a homeowner is defined as the 1/3 in that discretion of the city?
Sorry, if a homeowner isn't a part of that 2/3,
if they're not part of the 2/3, if there's discretion for the cities to leave 1/3 of their residential land as not small scale multi-unit housing, would that take away the opportunity for a homeowner that's currently able to do this, their townhomes or their multiplex development?
Well, again, it's really important that we work directly with homeowners on this and municipalities, because technically our municipalities, as you've mentioned, Bill, and as has been noted in some of the other questions, are at the bottleneck these long and tedious processes that we're seeing slow down the development of new homes and add to rising costs. So that's something that we need to look at holistically as we plan for our 6-month rezoning and development processes, and make sure that everyone who owns land can participate in that, as long as it's zoned accordingly for residential.
Why not simply improve on the current legislation and not repeal? I think this has been answered. Melissa has confirmed to the best that she can that it's not going to be completely repealed. It's going to be an adjustment and and it's going to be adapted in a new way. But you want to clarify or expand on that?
Just to clarify or expand on that, in repealing the legislation, that does not necessarily mean that there's not going to be that does not mean automatically that there's not going to be the opportunity for 4plexes and 6plexes in some case. And again, that will be something that we have to work with municipalities on, because it's hard to say right now that what we're trying to achieve here is working with municipalities and incentivizing municipalities to not only work with you, but to work with us. So that's with small home builders, but that's also with the province. So if we're all working together, we will see that bottleneck. What we hope to see is we'll see the permitting process expedited. We'll see things move forward faster, but we also will see a commitment to more homes, and that will include duplexes, 4plexes, 6plexes. Right now, we're seeing some municipalities that are dragging their heels on this, and that might not necessarily, for all of those of you on the webinar, that might not be the municipality that you own land in, but we are seeing that across the province with some municipalities who have not come forward with the Bill 44 under the BC NDP. That's an issue that we're hearing from small home builders that have purchased land in some municipalities, and they're saying, I thought that I'd be able to build a 4plex, but the municipality won't let me do that. For instance, municipalities on the North Shore and in Coquitlam, there's examples also where we haven't seen the municipal government aligned with the provincial government. So right now, we're not seeing that happen. We need to make sure that if you purchase land because of a provincial policy, that you get to build on that land what was promised. And we're not seeing that happen in every municipality under the BC NDP.
And I can add to that in terms of some of the cities that have adopted at least the zoning bylaw by the June 30th deadline. For example, Delta, the FSR, the floor space ratio that's attached to that zoning bylaw is so minimal that it's not creating family-oriented housing. The average unit size would be less than 800 square feet on an 8,000 square foot lot, killing the economic feasibility of a multiplex. And although they're meeting the provincial guidelines, still does not move any of that family-oriented housing forward.
Thank you, Bill. In the interest of not putting anyone on a naughty or a nice list, I was trying not to point that out myself, but I appreciate you sharing an example because I'm sure it's frustrating to many of the home builders who are here with us on this call.
Home builders, we have the homeowners.
Yeah.
And investors, families, it's something. Family-oriented housing is a passion of ours at Laidler, and many of the realtors see the challenges with helping families get into appropriate sized housing and different housing options, and some of this small scale multi-unit housing has been a big win. The BC Conservatives, this is my question. This will be the last question, and then we're going to break. We'll have some closing remarks from Carrie Van Aswegen, who is the BC Conservative candidate for Port Moody Coquitlam. To finish us off here, will the BC Conservatives consider allowing natural gas heating and stoves across all cities? And then as add on to that, the BC hydro timelines are one of the biggest delays and costs in construction. What can we envision in a BC Conservative government in relation to these two items?
Well, first of all, I want to say that we're blessed to live in a province with some of the most amazing natural resources. And in looking at affordability, and we're committed to affordability, and you'll see that throughout our platform and all of the announcements that we've made, not just on housing, but beyond, or land use or zoning. It's important that we look at how we have handcuffed free enterprise. And this is what I heard when I was with ICBA at a recent event that they had, was in some municipalities, the bans or heavy-handed approach on certain types of energy really have affected not only their bottom line, but what's being delivered to the market. We know that. We know that families are struggling to get by. The cost of groceries are high. So of course, we have to look at the most affordable types of energy. And the BC Conservatives completely acknowledge that natural gas is clean burning fuel. It's efficient, and it's great that we have options for renewable natural gas, but there's just not enough of it. to service the entire province. So we'll be working with those municipalities. And again, sorry to sound like a broken record, it'll be through an incentivized based approach. It won't be about using a stick. It will be about that carrot and working together to provide the most affordable housing and expedite that housing to come online. Again, really, this is making sure that small home builders and developers have a seat at the table, and we're not making decisions without you. So I think that that's really important. But what we have said is that we want to celebrate the natural resources that we have here in BC, and that includes natural gas. And I think I already answered the BC Hydro question, Bill, earlier in another question, which was we acknowledge, and I can tell you from my own experience working in development of many different scales, multifamily, residential, I understand that BC Hydro can be the toughest to achieve or work with. My apologies, one of my staff just came in the room, so I'm sorry I wasn't muted. But I just wanted to say that we have said that we will unhandcuff that. If BC Hydro cannot perform in the timelines that we need them to, we will look at alternatives. And I think I'd already mentioned that in another question that I answered, Bill, but you have our word. John Rustad just shared that with ICBA, I believe, again this morning at their conference. Thank you.
You're welcome. Vancouver City is now allowing for natural gas heating, and we've seen it open up the design possibilities for multiplex in Vancouver, especially opening up a parking stall by potentially not requiring a PMT. So that was a welcome change within the construction community, and we congratulate and thank the City of Vancouver for making that change. Any final words you'd like to part with, Melissa, before we hand over to...
I'd just like to thank each and every one of you for being here today. Bill, I'd really like to thank you for the opportunity and inviting me to be here to share how the BC Conservatives want to work together with all of you to make sure that we deliver more housing, make that housing more affordable. So thanks for your time, and I'm sure you'll look forward to hearing from my colleague Carrie as well. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Melissa. Carrie, welcome. Carrie Van Aswegen is the BC Conservative candidate for Port Moody and Burquitlam. This is my home riding, and we'd like to thank Carrie for putting her name forward and for closing us off here on this webinar. Hi, Carrie.
Hello. Thank you. Hi, my name is Carrie Van Aswegen, and I am the MLA candidate for Port Moody Burquitlam, as you've heard. I want to thank everybody for all your questions, and thank you, Melissa, for the very informative answers given. This has been a great discussion, and I'm really thankful that there are so many thoughtful people paying attention in this election. I hope that each one of you are willing to help us tackle the housing issue. We need to understand what is working and what changes need to be made, and we need your help with this. I'd like to give you a bit of background about myself. I immigrated to Canada 31 years ago, and actually today is my 31st anniversary of coming to Canada. We bought a small business in the Tri-Cities and have lived in the riding for 20 years. Over the years in our business, we have worked closely with construction companies, and especially in the last few years, when the focus of our business changed, and we are now doing large wayfinding projects with new builds, and as well as exterior signs. And over this time, I've watched the red tape and the rules and regulations make things harder and harder for the construction industry, to the point now where we have so much less housing new builds. This is one of the reasons I decided to run for MLA. I'll give you an example of how bad things have become in my industry, where we build and install signs. We do large wayfinding signage in hospitals, universities, and new builds. A small door sign, which is put at the entrance of each room in a building, for argument's sake, takes about 15 minutes to install. And with all the bureaucracy of WorkSafe, this now takes up to an hour to install. And what I mean by that is, each sign we install on each floor and each department has a separate risk assessment form to be filled out. I can understand risk assessment forms being filled out if we're installing a large sign outside of a building on the 4th floor, but these are small 7x7 acrylic signs that are glued to a wall. You can just imagine what that does to the price of the signs. This is not just happening in our industry, it's across the board. The government is interfering in our businesses, and this government overreach, in my opinion, has to stop so that this industry can revitalize and start growing again, so that we can address housing problems we're facing, create good paying jobs, and rebuild the confidence and trust in the BC government. As a business owner, I know and understand the frustrations we are all facing in this industry. At the same time, I've heard some optimism that things are changing. If elected, I assure you, I would love to work on changing some of these issues so that we can get back to work and get the houses built that we need in BC. I hope to earn your support in the next election on October 19th. It is important that everyone vote in this election so that we can see positive changes in our province. If anyone is able to donate to us to get our message out, we would greatly appreciate it. Melissa and I have links available on our BC Conservative website, and contributions there will go directly to our ridings that we represent. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Carrie. And thank you for all the work in the community in the sign business and putting your name forward. Thank you everyone for joining us. That concludes our webinar. We appreciate your input. Please continue to send your comments and feedback to myself or any of the candidates. We're here to help the industry move forward in the best way possible. Thank you again. Have a great rest of your day.